is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to Global Business Europe, live from CGTN in London. I'm Jamie Owen.
And I'm Juliet Mann. Israel moves troops to the border with Gaza and says it's ready for any military escalation.
Our other headlines: the electric car maker Elon Musk says Tesla will no longer accept Bitcoin following concerns about the currency's environmental impact.
Surge vaccinations are being considered to control a coronavirus variant that has UK scientists on edge.
And should we be vaccinating teenagers against coronavirus? We're reporting from Hungary to see how it's going there.
Heavy rocket fire and airstrikes have continued between Israel and Gaza on the first day of the Muslim festival of Eid. There have been international calls for a ceasefire, with the death toll rising on both sides and violence in a number of towns and cities.
Israel's army has massed on the Gaza border amid speculation about an invasion. Nicole Johnston reports.
This is the funeral of a Hamas commander in Gaza City. Hundreds of members of the group filled the streets. Israel says its military campaign is targeting Hamas leaders and buildings. But civilians are dying too, including more than a dozen children. The bodies of two boys are carried through the streets of Khan Yunis in central Gaza. 11-year-old Ammar and his 13-year-old cousin Hamada were killed in an Israeli airstrike. Palestinians' homes are being destroyed, and businesses too. This man says, "We were sitting inside our house. I heard our neighbours screaming. I went down to the street and asked what was going on. They said that the Israelis were threatening Abu Madda Tower. 20 rockets from F-16s cleared the square completely." Neither Hamas or the Israeli government is backing down in the worst violence between both sides since the 2014 Gaza war. Overnight, Hamas launched more rockets towards Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. They fired around 1,600 since the conflict started. And there are funerals in Israel too. Here for a woman killed by a rocket which landed in Rish LeZion. And in Sderot, an Israeli child was killed in his home.
The government should wipe out Gaza, once and for all. It's going to happen again many, many times. The government should wipe out Gaza.
On Thursday, Israeli tanks pounded Gaza.
Everybody in the world wants to see an end to a cycle of reprisals and retaliation. They want to see de-escalation. They want to see both sides sitting down, talking it through, and stopping the violence.
Across the West Bank, from Ramallah to Bethlehem, Palestinians threw stones, while the Israeli military fired rubber-coated steel bullets at them. There's been violence inside Israel as well, with Jews and Arabs in mixed towns attacking each other.
Jerusalem is a red line. Jerusalem is the heart of Palestine and its soul. No peace, security or stability until it's completely freed from the occupation.
And in Jerusalem, Palestinians marked the end of Ramadan and the start of the Eid holiday. They chanted support for Hamas. But what is there to celebrate when it looks like the build-up to war? Nicole Johnston, CGTN.
In a moment, our correspondent Stephanie Freed at the border between Israel and Gaza. But first to Noor Harazin in Gaza City. Noor, how long can Hamas keep up this current rocket bombardment?
Well, since day one, and Hamas and other militant wings have been threatening Israel that if it continues its air raids and aggression on the Gaza Strip, they will keep on firing rockets and attacking Israel by all possible ways and all ways they can. Just a few hours from now, there was a press conference where Abu Ubaidah, the spokesperson of the militant wing of Hamas, Al-Qassam Brigade, said that there is new weapons and new rockets. He even launched the name of a new rocket that they are using. The name of this rocket is Ayash 250. And according to the militant wing, this rocket can go as far as 250 kilometers. So yes, according to the militant wing here in Gaza, to Hamas and other militant wings, they do have many rockets, and they will be going on as long as Israel continue raiding the Gaza Strip.
The pictures are harrowing. I wonder how are ordinary Palestinians coping, and what about this fear of an invasion from Israel?
Well, even though today is the first day of Eid al-Fitr and the streets should be filled with Palestinians who are celebrating Eid al-Fitr, buying new clothes and chocolate, as you can see around me, the only thing that we can see is destruction and people who came basically to see the damage that has been happened in the streets of Gaza. Right now I am at Arimali Street, one of the most densely populated areas in Gaza. It's full of markets, and the only thing that we can witness is damage and people who came to see basically what happened to this area. Also the news of a ground invasion, it is making the people even more scared. This is the most intense escalation, Israeli-Palestinian escalation in Gaza for years now, and the people are really scared that they are being dragged to a new war with Israel.
Noor Harazin in Gaza City, thank you very much.
Well, let's talk to Stephanie Freed now, who's at the border between Israel and Gaza. Stephanie, there are international calls for a ceasefire. Is Israel taking note?
Perhaps taking note, but certainly not backing down and not at the moment interested in a ceasefire from everything we're seeing. I mean, we're standing near a position that's firing artillery onto Gaza at the moment. We know that regional diplomats, Europe, U.S., they're trying to broker a ceasefire, but Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's interim prime minister, has only talked about escalating, and you were talking about building up troops along the border. 7,000 reservists have been called up, and there are infantry and armory brigades standing by on the border, talking about a ground invasion versus actually invading by ground. They're two different things. It's easier to stand by, obviously, than to go in. And it's a well-known fact that if there is a ground invasion, that means the casualty toll rises, the casualty toll among Israel's army, which is not popular with the Israeli public as well. Gaza is well known for having an intricate underground system, underground cities they've been referred to, which, regardless of the level of intelligence, knowing that underground or being familiar with the underground system and knowing how to navigate that, that's an entirely different matter when troops are on the ground. So that's really what's happening now. No, it doesn't look like a ceasefire. It certainly is not in the interest of Israel at the moment, and the leaders are saying so. And now we're waiting to see. I'm hearing word that possibly weekend, but no definitive answers right now.
And Stephanie, there have been some attacks on individual Arabs and individual Jews in Israel. Can you give us some reaction there?
People are terrified, horrified. They're talking about anarchy, civil war. Things have descended into chaos. And certainly we were in the middle of that chaos in one of the cities that's the rampaging is the toughest in that city of Lod in central Israel. The police aren't able to keep up, and this is happening in dozens of cities throughout Israel, and it's marked by violence, lynchings, killings. And I understand from my sources that now in Tel Aviv, outside Tel Aviv as well. There is another plan of Jews to march through the city and, from what we're understanding, stab, quote, any Arab they see along the way.
Stephanie Freed on the Israel-Gaza border. Thanks very much.
Now the rest of the day's news, and Bitcoin and a host of other cryptocurrencies have tumbled by more than 10%. Tesla's chief executive, Elon Musk, triggered the sell-off by saying the company will no longer accept Bitcoin as payment for their electric cars. Some analysts say the move is another stumbling block to digital currencies achieving mainstream recognition.
And Musk has a track record of moving markets. He may have had a part in turning Dogecoin, which started as a social media joke involving a Japanese dog, into one of the biggest cryptocurrencies in the world. He tweeted a picture of the dog planting a Dogecoin flag on the moon with the word literally. The value of Dogecoin has soared more than 8,000% this year.
Well, the following month, the focus was back on Bitcoin. Musk tweeted, "You can now buy a Tesla with Bitcoin," after buying $1.5 billion worth of the cryptocurrency. Some investors said this was a landmark moment. Bitcoin rallied by nearly 70% this year.
And today came the reversal. Musk said cryptocurrencies have a promising future, but this cannot come at great cost to the environment. Critics have said the currencies use a massive amount of electricity and fossil fuels, and this clashes with Tesla's aim to be a green company. Well, Jeffrey Tucker is the author of Bit by Bit, How Peer-to-Peer Technology is Freeing the World. Thanks ever so much for joining us. Now, we all know that Musk is a bit of a self-proclaimed tech guru. Why do the markets hang on his every word?
Well, because he is that. He's a genius and quite a visionary. And he's always willing to take risks. That's the very essence of entrepreneurship, is to disrupt an existing sector with new ideas. Nobody imagined that, 15 years ago, there was such a thing as a Tesla that would be so ubiquitous on the streets of American cities. So he's, no question, he's a genius. He's a peculiar guy. A nice guy, very interesting person. And so he looked at this Bitcoin and he said, well, this feels like a money. I don't know why I shouldn't just take it. So he implemented that system. But the thing that he didn't know is that he was getting into a kind of a problem. Bitcoin exists in a very critical stage right now where the U.S. government is trying to figure out what to do with it. This is true under Trump, but it's especially true under Biden. They're trying to figure out how to regulate it. Is it a security? Should we regulate it like a security? Should we treat it as a proxy for the dollar with know your customer rules? How are taxes going to handle this in terms of capital gains? There's tremendous confusion and a lot of struggles in DC right now. And with Musk suddenly saying, oh, I'll just take it as if it's money. Well, he weighed in on this very important critical issue. What is the future of cryptocurrency? And he seemed to, endorse it. And I think, and I don't have any evidence of this, but he must have gotten enormous pushback from many quarters, probably from the Federal Reserve itself, from the Treasury Department, even internally. I don't know. I do know that the excuse he gave, that it uses too much electricity, is ridiculous on the face of it.
Oh, I was going to ask you about that because, yes, we know he's passionate about tech. He's also passionate about the environment. So you kind of ask what took him so long to cotton on that Bitcoin isn't really that green.
Well, that's one of the reasons it takes a lot of resources. It's true, but it also, has provided a great market for electrical services around the world. Bitcoin miners hunt around for the best prices, and those services have actually greatly benefited from Bitcoin. There's no particular reason to think the electricity should be used for something other than Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a wonderful resource. It is and very efficient, actually. So I don't think there's anything to this idea that somehow it's ruining things just because miners are using electricity to power something. I mean, everything uses electricity. I've never understood this debate. Now, some people think that money should just be costless. You should be able to create unlimited quantities of it at very low cost with, for example, a printing press. That seems to be the view of the Federal Reserve, but that view is also leading to higher and higher inflation right now in the U.S. I mean, that's the great thing about Bitcoin, is that it's extremely limited and governed protocol that limits how much can be created, and that's the reason for its high value. So that's all connected to its resource use. Also, it works very much like gold. You have to dig gold out of the mines. That's why people stop, mining it when it gets too low in price, and they mine more when it goes high in price. It's the same way with Bitcoin.
Now, we've been talking on this program about how Bitcoin's become quite mainstream, but in a nutshell, what the whole crypto scene, it's really volatile, isn't it?
Oh, crazy, right? I've been involved in these markets since 2012, and I laugh about, every time it goes down, it goes up, people get super excited, and then they panic when it falls. It's just like after Musk's announcement, Elon's announcement about how they would no longer accept Bitcoin for Tesla. Suddenly, Bitcoin fell from $59,000 to $48,000, and everybody was, screaming, headed for the fields. On the other hand, it was a buy opportunity. So now you see it's trying to recover. I've been through this. It seems like 500 times by now. Everybody panics. Oh, look what crashed the markets, and that's just a buy opportunity for other people. It's crazy volatile, and that's why I wouldn't recommend it as a mainstream investment. It's a little bit crazy. It's still highly speculative. It has been ever since it reached $1. The point at which many people sold. So, this is the way these markets work. It's still an emerging technology, and we're still in a period of price discovery, and we're going to be there. I look forward to repeating this interview in 10 years, and we're talking about, can you believe it fell from 750,000 to 700,000 in 10 minutes?
Well, I hope that we get to speak to you sooner than in 10 years' time. Jeffrey Tucker, an absolute pleasure speaking to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, e-commerce giant Alibaba beats earnings forecasts, but that's not the whole story.
Search CGTN Europe wherever you get your podcasts to subscribe to The Agenda podcast. The Agenda with me, Stephen Cole, always gets to the heart of the story. Just subscribe today and listen now.
Covering the world from 4 continents. A new horizon. Teams in Beijing, Washington, D.C., Nairobi, and London. Who connect, interact, and inquire to bring you the stories that matter to all. The Link, only on CGTN. Facing the unknown is always difficult. In a world in turmoil, it's easy to lose orientation. But when the storms come, we have to see the possibilities. Reinvent. Find new opportunities. Discover a path forward. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. Stock markets in Europe and Asia have been falling after losses in New York on Wednesday. Investors have been taking flight over stronger than expected US inflation figures.
However, some big corporate companies have been updating the market with their latest results. Let's go live to New York and our correspondent John Terrett. John, yet more inflation evidence.
Yes, I'm afraid so. Let me put this into context for you. Yesterday, Wednesday, we had CPI, that's consumer prices, And everybody got very exercised about that, as you will remember, and the markets here in New York went straight down because it came in far worse than had been anticipated, because this is prices that you actually pay over the counter right now. So that's things like food and clothing and fuel, of course. We have the Colonial Pipeline not helping that. Used cars are almost as expensive now as new cars here in America, and lumber, and that's wood, because there's so much DIY going on. So today, Thursday, we had PPI, which is producer price inflation. Think of it, if you will, as wholesale prices. In other words, what the makers pay to make the things that they make and then sell on to us. Well, here are the details then. We had producer price inflation, 6.2% up in April over April of last year, and up 0.6% over March of this year. That was pretty much double what Wall Street had been expecting. So 2 days of shocks then regarding inflation. Now, the economists and the Federal Reserve say, look, everything's okay, don't panic. This is happening because the recovery has been so much stronger than we thought it was going to be, and things were so bad at this time last year, and that's why we're seeing inflation. But Wall Street says, aha, we don't believe you. We're not sure. And the reason they're not sure is because in the past, whenever the Federal Reserve has been what they call behind the eight ball here, in other words, not catching up to the fact that inflation is coming quickly enough, there has been a recession. And Wall Street's very concerned that the Federal Reserve is not even talking about inflation, never mind putting up interest rates to curb it. They're not even talking about that. And Wall Street wonders if they're going to do anything a little bit too late, and that will all lead to a recession. So that's why you saw the markets falling so far yesterday, with the Dow down 681 points. But as I've said to you several times, Jamie and Juliet, you can't call Wall Street, frankly. And today, despite the grim news on PPI, we have Wall Street shooting up. The Dow is ahead by 178 points at the moment. The Nasdaq's up 100, and the S&P 500 is up more than 50. So basically, we say to you, go figure.
John, we've been talking for days about that US pipeline that went offline. Has that now been resolved? Has that gone away?
Yeah, it looks like it. I think so. This happened last Friday. We heard about it over the weekend, and they finally put it back on stream today, Thursday. So 6 days, not really very good, to be honest with you. But the issue of shortages is down to panic buying. Now, I did hint at this yesterday. I'm afraid it is a little bit of an American disease, one way and another, panic buying. The moment there's a problem, people shoot out and they snap up everything from gas to toilet rolls to candles. That's, I'm afraid, just the way it is. We have shortages in North Carolina and Georgia and Virginia at the moment, but we are told with this pipeline running, it'll take a few days possibly to get back to normal, but we are on the way back to normal. The bigger question, though, Jamie, of course, as you know only too well, is can this happen again, and where might the next hacking attack be? And in fact, I can't see him at the moment, but I think President Biden is talking about the hack pretty much right now here in America.
John, good to talk to you. John Terrett there in New York.
E-commerce giant Alibaba has beaten all forecasts in its latest quarterly results. Revenue was up 64% to the end of March, boosted by the rise in online shopping during lockdown. However, a record fine from regulators pushed the group into an overall operating loss. Well, Richard Turin is the author of Cashless, China's Digital Currency Revolution. I asked him what he made of the figures.
What can you say? This is a blowout, 64% revenue growth year on year. It's pretty mind-blowing. So anybody who had lost faith, or in other words, or another way, was selling Alibaba short, they have been proven wrong. Alibaba has nailed it for the numbers for this year.
You say they've nailed it for the numbers, but the share price doesn't really reflect that. I mean, they've had their ups and downs. Massive consumer growth, yes, but also those big fines from the regulator on antitrust practices. So what is it going to take for investors to buzz about Baba again?
Absolutely. Investors have been skittish with Alibaba because of their fear of regulations and the regulators. Let's face it, the $2.8 billion fine hurt, no question about it. I won't make light of it. But what people need to really be focusing on is the goal of the regulators to push innovation in China, the goal of the regulators to eliminate the gray areas that many of China's tech companies, and we're not talking just about Alibaba, have been living in, to make the foundation for tech in China stronger. So for people to get less skittish about Alibaba, unfortunately, and this is hard for many, they have to fall a little bit more in love with the regulators who are setting the stage for long-term growth, not just for Alibaba, but tech all throughout China.
It's interesting you mention that because there has been a bit of a Wild West vibe about the web, a sort of free-for-all. But we are seeing governments, China in particular, wanting more control of big tech.
Absolutely. Anybody who's feeling skittish about Alibaba or China tech stocks, principally because of regulators, has to see this in context with a global move for antitrust in the EU with Apple, in the United States, of course, with Google, and Facebook. The goal of the regulator is not to randomly punish big tech companies. Their goal is to ensure an environment that fosters innovation on a continuing basis within China. The other goal they have is risk reduction, because these are systemically critical organizations now. They're not small fintechs. They're not small tech companies. They're little startups. They are massive.
So that's the big picture of China's digital transformation. Let's hone in again on Alibaba. Talk to me about how important active buyers are, or if actually it's all about the cloud.
Active buyers are everything, and it's one of the most critical numbers that the analysts are all looking at. Just imagine if the number were low or static, investors would be thinking, well, there's not more growth. Alibaba's tapped out. That obviously isn't the case. Alibaba had absolutely record-breaking 1 billion active buyers this year, which is a mind-blowing figure. What it means is it's touching virtually a large percentage of the entire 1.4 billion population in China. So the large $1 billion active buyer number basically is showing there is continued growth for Alibaba in China. And next year will be another big number, I'm sure.
The UK online travel agent On the Beach has stopped selling holidays abroad for this summer due to coronavirus uncertainty. Its CEO says the government's traffic light system for quarantine-free travel provides no clarity, and his company has no interest in selling holidays that are unlikely to happen.
Italy's competition authority is fining Google more than $120 million for abuse of its market position. It's alleged the giant tech company is shutting out a rival smartphone app which offers electric vehicle recharging. Google says it disagrees with the finding and is considering its next steps.
Burberry shares have fallen in London over fears the luxury retailer is having a slower recovery from the pandemic than some of its rivals. The company, famous for its trench coat and tartan check, has reinstated its dividend to pre-pandemic levels.
Britain's roadmap to freedom was supposed to see the country reopened by the end of June, but those plans are now under threat.
The government's Scientific Advisory Committee is holding an emergency meeting about the rapid spread of a variant that originated in India amid warnings that the UK may have to delay its reopening. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson says he's ruling nothing out. Well, let's talk now to our correspondent, Andrew Wilson. Andrew, how big a problem is this new variant for the UK?
Well, the problem is, Jamie, no one quite knows yet, but I think there are a lot of members of the scientific community who are wishing that the country had this conversation a little earlier than it is now. What with us now being promised to move on May 17th, this Monday, to a much, much freer restriction on lockdown legislation. So there are concerns that that now may be a little bit too premature. This variant, which has now clearly entered the country in various areas, has caused a spike in infections in Glasgow, also in Greater Manchester and Bolton. And whereas coronavirus infections in general in this country have gone down by a half in a month, they've gone up, tripled in a week in terms of infections by this new virus, this 16172 variant that was first spotted in India. So there's talk of surge vaccinations, of perhaps localized shutdowns and so on. But essentially, it's now at a situation where the government is not as sure as it was even a few days ago about what the future holds for this summer, and it's starting to show its concern.
There is talk of pushing back a key reopening deadline in June. I wonder what impact that would have.
Yeah, I think the impact would be quite significant. It's not clear, though, whether it be more significant on the arrangements for people's lifestyles or how people reacted to that. Such has been the sense of anticipation right up until today in terms of what might happen this Monday, in terms of families getting together and so forth. The examinations, therefore, it puts quite a bit of pressure on the scientists to come up with some answers. At the moment, this variant doesn't seem to cause more severe disease. Does it resist the vaccines? There's no real evidence yet that it does that, although there is a slight question mark over it. But does it transmit more easily? Well, at the moment, it's showing the same sort of record as the so-called Kent variant, which is quite rapid transmission. If that proves to be actually worse than first thought, that could be a real problem for this June 21st deadline, which is the complete release from lockdown conditions. So there is a threat over that. And of course, remember, the government has 4 tests that have to be satisfied before it moves to the next stage, each stage of its roadmap. One of those tests is, have we got control of all the potential variants that we know about, and do we know how to deal with them? Well, if there's a question mark over that, they can't, by their own legislation, move forward to what they hope to do on June 21st.
And Andrew, what of the global implications? The UK was leading the way out in Europe, out of lockdown, doing well on vaccine rollout and seemingly beating the pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, the UK is becoming, for the international community, something of a test case because of the success of the vaccine program, and also because of the success of a vaccine program based mainly on the AstraZeneca vaccine, which has had such a controversial experience with a lot of countries and their medical legislations. But 50 countries have now reported infections from this variant 16172, the B16172. So that is moving rapidly around the world. The world will then be asking itself the question, what kind of effect will that have on countries like the United States, on Brazil, on South Africa, on European countries which are not as advanced with their vaccine program? And they will look to the UK to see how it deals with and what measures it takes to deal with this new variant, because what they'll want to know is, does a nearly completed vaccine program, which is what we now have, let's face it, in the UK, pretty much 38 and 39-year-olds are now getting calls to get their first jab. How does a country like the UK, so readily vaccinated as it is, deal with a new variant coming through that has different characteristics that the vaccine might not be able to cope with or might be able to cope with? So we are now in the position of becoming a kind of a test case for other countries around the world to look at.
Andrew Wilson, thank you very much.
Well, for 2 days in a row this week, Germany has inoculated more than 1 million people in a single day.
More than a third of the population has had at least one dose, and the government there says all adults will be able to book an appointment by June. Ryan Thompson reports.
Germany's vaccination campaign is no longer waiting for a green light. Inoculations are speeding up across the country, and vaccination centers like this one are finally bustling. So far, 1/3 of the population has had at least one dose of a COVID-19 vaccine, and in just a few weeks' time, everyone 18 and older will become eligible.
Since the start of April, Germany has shifted gears in the pace of its vaccine rollout, breaking European records for the number of jabs given in a single day. Wednesdays like today have the most momentum, where they're giving over 1 million shots between vaccination centers like this one and general practitioners' offices.
GPs account for most of the vaccinations Monday to Friday, and since they were brought on board to help in April, the number of inoculations has more than doubled. Vaccination centers primarily give out temperature-sensitive jabs like those from Pfizer and Moderna, and they're now receiving weekly deliveries in the millions.
We could vaccinate even more people, but the vaccine is still not fully there. As soon as it is available in the appropriate quantities, we can run at full capacity here.
Some feared that vaccine hesitancy would prevail in Germany, but it's become more common to see people waiting for leftover shots or presenting fake documents to jump ahead. Under federal law, fully vaccinated people are now exempt from quarantines, curfews, and regular testing, and authorities plan to digitize paper vaccine certificates soon.
The so-called digital green certificate is of the utmost importance. This is not only important for countries depending on tourism, this is not just important for a few, it's important for all of us.
Germany has thrown its support behind the EU's so-called green certificate, but millions more will be vaccinated before Berlin can hand it out alongside every jab. Ryan Thompson, CGTN, Wiesbaden.
Now, if you have a spare $30,000 and fancy grabbing yourself a piece of European history, then auctioneers in Romania may have just the thing. The private jet, owned by the country's former leader, Nicolae Ceausescu, is up for sale. It's one of only a handful made. More at europe.cgtn.com. And remember, CGTN is available to watch for free on all the major digital platforms, on Smart TV or online on Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV. We're on YouTube, Dailymotion and CGTN.com and the CGTN app.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, can the Olympics in Japan really go ahead? The growing voices warning of COVID concerns.
More than 100,000 people in Italy have now died from COVID-19.
The vaccination programme offers some hope for the future, but intensive care units are near capacity.
The Spanish government is hoping to vaccinate over 1 million people by next month.
Living in Germany are struggling with their mental health.
Hungary is supplementing the EU's vaccine rollout, buying doses from Russia and China to speed up the process.
4 million people have tested positive in France.
After a grim winter, the promise of a spring bloom that could mean freedom for millions.
On the agenda with me, Stephen Cole, we look up into space. We look down into data. We look at debt. We look at politics. We look at opioids, climate change. We look at all the issues that really matter around the world. But you matter too. We want to tell the stories you want to see and hear about. Make it your agenda.
Roger, read you loud and clear.
We can try out the wild and crazy ideas.
Nothing can stop an idea whose time is coming. This idea is coming.
I actually feel quite comfortable in isolation.
We should all be very basic when we're trying to save the world.
Awesome!
We hope it will happen. We have to live in hope.
The agreement is signed. But what is the real deal now the UK has left the EU? For trade, for business, for the city, for ordinary people. Make sense of Brexit with CGTN.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe with Jamie Owen and Juliet Mann. Our top stories. Israel moves troops to the border with Gaza and says it's ready for any military escalation.
One of the headlines, the electric car maker Elon Musk says Tesla will no longer accept Bitcoin following concerns about the currency's environmental impact.
And surge vaccinations are being considered to control a coronavirus variant that has UK scientists on edge. Indian authorities in the Mumbai region have stepped up door-to-door COVID testing. The operation poses fresh challenges to medical professionals who are already overwhelmed by a devastating second wave of the pandemic. Subhash Sharma reports.
The Mumbai city government has ramped up door-to-door community testing in residential pockets where it sees a spike in cases. As well as detecting individual cases, the operation helps authorities map high-incident zones and plan interventions. But as Dr. Avantika Nandrekar explains, the task is not as straightforward as it seems.
Some of them even feel that we can infect them. So they are scared about that as well. So yes, we have a lot of challenges.
And the soaring summer temperatures add to the practical difficulties the teams face in having to roam the neighborhoods sheltering inside their PPE kit. But more and more residents are coming forward as awareness increases on the value of getting tested and stopping community transmission. But as the second wave gains momentum, there are fewer medical professionals available to meet the increased testing demand. Mohit Shukla has been collecting COVID samples from home since the pandemic started. Home collection medics like him are increasingly suffering from burnout as the cases spike. In big cities like Mumbai, results are available within 28 to 35 hours. In other parts, there is a delay of about 48 to 72 hours.
I don't get home till 1 a.m. There are fewer lab technicians available to work. Some were working but have been infected by COVID. Mumbai is an overcrowded city. Most stay together in large families and they're scared for their families, so they don't want to return to work. The entire workload has fallen to a few of us. People don't care that you're tired or feeling sleepy. People call us at 2 a.m, 3 a.m. at night, inquiring whether their reports have come. We're not getting enough sleep.
And as the cases surge, in addition to the scarcity of oxygen, medicines, ICU beds and vaccines, India now also has to deal with the scarcity of medical professionals. Subhash Sharma, CGTN, Mumbai.
Well, in the United States, children as young as 12 will now be allowed to get the Pfizer COVID vaccine after health regulators there gave approval.
The shots will let children safely attend summer camps and have a more normal return to classrooms. Vaccination of children over the age of 12 has already taken place in Israel, and Pfizer has requested European drug regulators widen their approval of its vaccine to include adolescents.
Hungary's COVID vaccination programme has hit another milestone, offering vaccines for teenagers aged 16 to 18. It's one of the first countries in Europe to begin vaccinating teens. Penelope Lietch reports now from Budapest.
After more than 4.4 million Hungarians received their first dose of COVID vaccine, teenagers are now being vaccinated as well. More than 90,000 16 to 18-year-olds signed up online in the past week and are being given appointments from Thursday. We're with 16-year-old Anna Banovic for one of the first such appointments in Budapest. While there are 6 vaccines on offer in Hungary, the teenagers are only being administered with Pfizer. The country has ordered more than 10 million doses of the vaccine. Around 3 million have already arrived in the country. Another 1.3 are due to arrive this month, and 2.2 million doses are due to arrive in June. The government says Hungary is the first country in the EU to have enough vaccine to vaccinate everyone who wants a jab.
I'm a little bit nervous, but I'm super excited. I'm glad I have the ability to be vaccinated.
The Pfizer vaccine being given to teenagers is in high demand in the country. Recently, the government offered people the chance to sign up for it for one day only. It caused the online booking system to crash. People queued for hours, and the 100,000 doses on offer quickly ran out. It's hoped these new shipments will allow more people to be vaccinated with Pfizer, as it's recognised by international bodies, including the European Medicines Agency. The government has stated that all the vaccines on offer in the program are safe. However, they've acknowledged people are more willing to take a vaccine if they can have the one of their preference.
It was very quick. They helped us all along. I'm completely fine. Everything's okay. I don't feel headache or my arm's not numb. And I'm pretty excited to finally go to restaurants maybe and meet up with my friends.
Having a vaccine is vital for how Hungarians can live under current COVID restrictions. Many people can now visit the places they did before the pandemic as long as they have an immunity certificate. But for teenagers, this means they need to accompany a vaccinated parent in order to access services like gyms, pools, indoor dining and sporting events. Having their own vaccine will open up a lot more opportunities. The immunity cards are sent out as a plastic card in the mail after the first dose, so Anna should receive hers in a couple of weeks. Poland is also saying they will start to vaccinate 16 to 18-year-olds soon. France will also offer the vaccine to 16 and 17-year-olds who are at higher risk. Penelope Liesch, CGTN, Budapest.
Americans in the state of Ohio who get at least one COVID vaccination could win $1 million. The lottery, offered by Governor Mike DeWine, is trying to encourage more people to get jabbed. DeWine denied wasting federal pandemic funds, saying true waste is if plentiful vaccines don't get used. The cash will be awarded to 5 people each week. The number of Americans seeking vaccinations has dropped by a third.
China says it supports the World Trade Organization holding talks on waiving intellectual property protections on COVID vaccines. The Commerce Ministry says China will actively participate. The WTO has faced calls to temporarily remove patent protections. The United States has backed this proposal, but some European leaders have expressed scepticism. 2 months until the Tokyo Olympics, and Japan is locked in a debate about whether the Games really should now be cancelled. COVID infections are surging and a number of areas are under a state of emergency. Matt Studdard reports.
Public doubt is growing in Japan. But Prime Minister Suga and the country's Olympic Organising Committee both say they're confident the Summer Games will be safe and secure. The committee's chief executive says cancellation has not been discussed. But protesters across the country say it should. And a petition to call off the Games for a second time has received hundreds of thousands of signatures.
Japan's facing a medical crisis. Osaka is on the verge of collapse. Many are unable to be admitted into hospitals and are being treated at their homes. As a result, many have died at home without getting proper treatment. People question whether we should spare precious medical resources for the Olympics when we're unable to save lives in the country.
A recent request by the organising committee for nurses to be deployed at the Games has fuelled the protests.
We were surprised and angered by the request for 500 nurses. If we can spare so many people, we should send them to strained medical services or the vaccination centres, which are in need of more nurses. We can't comprehend why the Olympics should be a priority.
Comments from the Prime Minister haven't helped. He said too many nurses had left their jobs or taken time off from work and suggested some of them could be recalled to work at the Games.
There's an increasing number of nurses who quit their jobs due to the pandemic. There aren't enough new nurses to fill the positions, and we're even asking pregnant women to work overnight shifts. The hospitals are overwhelmed and staff are suffering from intense stress.
Messages on Twitter from nurses opposed to the Olympics have gone viral, prompting local governors to reject the request for them to work at the Games, saying athletes should not take precedence over the public. Many have accused Prime Minister Suga of putting the Olympics above public health to gain popularity.
It's all about political motives. Suga's approval rating's at its lowest, so he's hoping the Games might recover his popularity and make him win an election.
Japan is struggling to contain the latest wave of coronavirus. If the number of infections continues to rise, then the Olympics could fall victim. Matt Stuttard, CGTN.
The former Bosnian Serb political leader Radovan Karadzic, convicted of war crimes during the Balkans conflict of the 1990s, will serve the remainder of his sentence in the UK. Since 2016, he's been held in The Hague. Karadzic was convicted of genocide for the 1995 Srebrenica massacre of more than 8,000 Muslims by Bosnian Serb forces. He was also found guilty of war crimes and crimes against humanity.
Sri Lanka has imposed a 3-day lockdown as the daily average of new coronavirus infections reaches new highs. Streets were quiet on Thursday, in contrast to the day before, when residents in the capital rushed to markets to stock up on supplies. The island nation isn't getting enough vaccines from neighbouring India.
There's been another night of violence in the Colombian capital, Bogotá. Riot police fired tear gas and flash grenades on thousands of anti-government protesters in a third week of demonstrations. The protests began over pandemic-related tax reforms, but are now fueled by anger over police brutality and economic inequality.
UEFA has announced that the Champions League football final between Manchester City and Chelsea will be moved from Istanbul to Porto. The change of venue comes after Britain placed Turkey on a red travel list, meaning English supporters couldn't go. Portugal's on the green list, so fans can attend the game at the home ground of FC Porto on May the 29th.
China says it aims to reuse 60% of its urban household waste by 2025. The country is trying to increase its waste handling capacity to meet that deadline. The authorities are rolling out regulations, making people sort their rubbish, and are also restricting single-use plastics.
This weekend, experts from across the globe should have been gathering in China for the world's largest biodiversity summit, COP15. Thanks to the pandemic, it's been postponed to October this year. Well, some have suggested that the world simply can't wait for new targets to be agreed, but the Executive Secretary for the UN's Convention on Biodiversity told CGTN's Stephen Cole COVID has had some positive effects on the natural world.
One, particularly now you have mentioned the cities. The city populations have realized the benefits of nature to their well-being. We have seen now people going more to the parks for a walk. We have seen the animals walking around the cities. And of course, us being locked in, we appreciate seeing those animals and finding ourselves more comfort and connection into the nature. And of course, this situation has enabled also the population calling on their governments and decision makers to make nature a priority as they're rebuilding back better after the COVID. Also, studies have shown that nature reduces anger, fear, and stress. And you can imagine, these are the issues individuals are facing as the result of lockdown. So getting out to the nature has reduced or tend to reduce this hormone stress coming in as the result of those frustration and stresses. So nature is important to our physical well-being.
And you can see more of that interview on The Agenda with Stephen Cole this weekend here on CGTN. You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, a human heart entombed in a fountain, the mystery that is 150 years old.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there. To see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Mari, what would you say is a good question?
Stephen, I'd say it's one where there's always more than one answer.
The Answers Project is a new podcast series from CGTN Europe. With me, Stephen Cole.
And me, Mari Beveridge. In each episode, we'll take a complex question.
And with the help of some of the world's foremost experts, shine light on some of the answers. So join us for The Answers Project.
Available wherever you get your podcasts.
What does a sustainable future mean? What can we do with millions of tons of plastics, glass, food, clothes piling up on our planet? Ahead of this year's pivotal COP26 summit, CGTN Europe looks at what consumers, businesses, and governments are doing to offer a better world to generations to come. Trash or Treasure starts May 17th on CGTN Europe.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. An 140-year-old mystery has been solved in the Belgian town of Verviers. It has to do with the heart of the town's first mayor.
And how it became entombed in an ornate fountain. Tony Waterman has the story.
After months of sleuthing and high-tech x-rays, it's now been confirmed. This is the 250-year-old heart of Pierre David, the first and much beloved mayor of the small Belgian town of Verviers. But to understand how his heart ended up pickled and preserved in this copper box, you need to go back to 1839. At the time, Verviers was a textile and wool powerhouse. Renowned for the quality of its products, the town expanded quickly, both in size and wealth. At the helm was David. Known as a champion of the poor, he encouraged the creation of the first social housing blocks in Europe.
He refused to be paid for being mayor, and the people, the workers who were poor, who had poor living conditions, loved him because he was concerned about their fate.
Tragically, his life and mayorship was cut short in a farming accident 9 years into his tenure.
We are here at the exact location where, on June 30th, 1839, Pierre David died. He wanted to ventilate the hay in his hayloft. He's upstairs, he tries to open the window, the frame breaks and he falls, dead.
And that is when a legend was born. After his death, it was decided that this great man should be honored, albeit in a rather strange way. Take out his heart and put it in some sort of memorial.
3 days after his death, David's heart was removed. But for the next 44 years, it was kept pickled in this tube as money was raised to build a memorial. Then it seemingly disappeared, only to resurface 137 years later during restoration work on an ornate fountain in the town square last summer.
We were removing stones on the upper part, above the coat of arms, and something fell on the worker while he was pulling out the stone. He thought it was a piece of wood, but when he took it in his hand, he realized that it was a box with something inside.
It's now proudly on display at the local museum, but only for a few more months. Director Caroline Henry says the box and heart will be returned to the fountain this fall, when restoration work is completed.
It was so moving to think there is still a part of the human body that was in this box. But I personally feel it should be returned to the fountain because it was the will of the people at the time.
Pierre David's heart entombed in the heart of his beloved city for centuries to come. Tony Waterman, CGTN, Verviers, Belgium.
Well, after that, you might need a little bit of this. A Belgian spa has brought new meaning to the phrase beer on tap.
Yes, bathers in Brussels can hop in for an immersive experience, soaking in the atmosphere in a tub of beer while enjoying a freshly poured glass, though it's probably still best not to drink the bath water.
Headlines again. Israel moves troops to the border with Gaza and says it's ready for any military escalation.
Our other headlines, the electric car maker Elon Musk says Tesla will no longer accept Bitcoin following concerns about the cryptocurrency's environmental impact.
And surge vaccinations are being considered to control a coronavirus variant that has UK scientists on edge.
And that's it for Global Business Europe. Thank you for watching. More on all of our stories at europe.cgtn.com. And do follow CGTN Europe on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram.
We're on smart TV apps such as Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV. On YouTube and Dailymotion, cgtn.com and the CGTN app. From all of the team here in London, goodbye.
Goodbye.